Joining me now is the chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. It's Virginia Democratic Senator Mark Warner. Senator, let me just start with an assessment on Putin these days, which is simply, he knows he's stuck. Is he looking for a way out yet, or is he still looking for an advantage in negotiations?
Chuck, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure anyone in our intelligence community, or for that matter, across the West knows. This is a guy, an autocrat who's been more and more isolated. The number of inputs he is getting gets a smaller and smaller number. We've seen this historically where dictators get more and more isolated, and that usually leads to their demise. We're not even 100% sure that he's getting fully accurate reports of how badly the Russian invasion is going. But let me make one quick point, Chuck. I mean, it's remarkable in a way that we're still seeing these images real time come out of Ukraine. You remember a number of months ago, Russia intervened in Kazakhstan. After a couple of days, they shut down the internet. The fact that we're still getting these images, candidly, the fact that the press is still able to report, I want to give you guys kudos. I mean, the end of the day, part of this battle is about the notion of democracy and a free press versus the kind of limited propaganda approach that Russia's putting forward. I thought your last guest was very a really important point, that he's not even sure his Russian friends are getting the true story of what's happening on the ground.
No, it was very interesting to talk to him because he was very matter of fact, and then there was this anger at the end that you can feel. It tells you peace will not be easy here. Every day this goes on, as brutal as Putin is getting, what Zelensky might have been comfortable negotiating yesterday, he won't be comfortable negotiating tomorrow here. And so when it comes to trying to find an end game here, let me ask you this way. Do we need to get prepared for the fact that we may have to see this end with Putin still in charge of Russia, and maybe with him getting back into the world order if he agrees to certain conditions?
Chuck, I'm not prepared to weigh in on that yet. Clearly, Putin is I think President Biden is right. I think he is a war criminal. I think we ought to
Should he have said
continue to ratchet up. But I think it's important to say that. I think it's important to call out these actions. And I frankly think we ought to go ahead and sanction every member of the Russian parliament, the so-called Duma. I think we ought to hold some of these Russian officers accountable for their willing to literally bomb clearly civilian targets. I think this needs to be an economic effort, and I commend what we've done. I also commend the American companies who've pulled out of doing business with Russia. I think we need to continue to send additional military aid. And I think, again, one of your earlier guests about the Stingers and the Javelins, I think we need to give longer range anti-aircraft tools that can take out some of those Russian assets at a longer range basis. And I think we need to really say to the Russian leadership, the world writ large are going to hold you accountable. And one thing I also hope that President Biden does tomorrow is to say to President Xi in China that, if you continue this alliance, and frankly, what we have heard is that Chinese economic advisors are concerned that this is really a Putin-Xi relationship, not a China-Russia relationship. I think we need to bring all forms of pressure to bear.
Is Xi agreeing to this meeting good news in your view? Does this tell you something that he wants to take maybe a half step away from Putin?
I don't have direct insight on that, but we know this has been a rocky relationship. We know that the Chinese crave stability. We are going into an extraordinarily unstable period, so I do take it as a good sign that he's taken the call from President Biden.
On the issue of weapons, and there's obviously, I get this sense that Congress wants to do more than the Pentagon does right now. Do you get that sense that there's a bipartisan eagerness here? Let's do more, whether it's, getting Slovenia to send their S-300s, will replace those weapon systems. Is there a majority? Do you feel like you're having to push the Biden administration here a little bit?
Well, Chuck, this is a very delicate balance. I mean, the fact is, and I think we need to get this more into the reporting, Ukraine's got over 50 aircraft left. I mean, the fact that the Russians were so inept at taking out the Ukrainian Air Force day one is one more example of their ineptitude. They still have a large number of MiGs and other aircraft they can fly. They are not flying the number of sorties that, candidly, I think we would have expected. The ability to take out the Russian aircraft, I think, can be better served by Stingers and some of these systems you've indicated that can be moved from those countries adjacent. Without the potential, what we don't want to do, you've started this interview with questions about Putin's mindset. What you don't want to do is give Putin the excuse to escalate this up into a realm that suddenly has NATO and Russia literally in armed conflict. And striking that balance in a way also, because remember, the ability to send, whether it's jets or other things, we have so far maintained total lockstep with NATO. I know for a fact that many of those NATO countries would be reluctant on some of these moves. We have to keep the alliance united, and we have to keep ratcheting up the pressure. And there's a real tension here. You're absolutely right.
Last questions on the economy. I'm sure you read Larry Summers' op-ed in the Washington Post the other day. He is warning of that stagflation and recession without massive Federal Reserve intervention is more likely than ever. Do you concur?
I was glad to see the Fed start the process. I think they're going to need to continue to ratchet up rates. I think there are things now that gets harder when you've got a war going on with all its disruption. I think there are some low-hanging fruit, things like passing the so-called CHIPS bill that would invest in American semiconductor production so that we could help ultimately ease the supply chain challenges. That's not going to have an immediate reaction, but it will be a good signal to the market that we are working in a united way to take on some of these supply chain issues. But the Fed's got its job cut out for it. That's one of the reasons why we need to go ahead and approve the frickin' Federal Reserve Board members. Luckily, we got 4 out last night, but we need a full-time Federal Reserve. I've been very disappointed that for weeks on end, some of my Republican colleagues, they could have voted no, but they wouldn't even come to a meeting.